let's get started. We're up to about 460 attendees right now in this virtual town hall. And I want to start, so I'm Kelsey Martin, I'm the Dean of the David Geffen School of Medicine. I want to start by thanking everybody for convening today. I also do want to do a shout out to our Digit team who have really become critical members of our operations and our education team, and we're so grateful for all of them and for everything that they do. So I'm going to start with just a sort of framing comments here to everybody from the David Geffen School of Medicine and to our partners who are joining us from the Charles R. Drew University. Thank you for joining us. And we're really living in a very unique moment in history with the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's a time in which we need to come together as a community of physicians and physician scientists in training. And it's really time to refocus on our shared mission of healing humanity and to practice the calling that you've all chosen in coming here to the David Geffen School of Medicine. I have no doubt that what you're going to learn in the coming weeks and months, and I know that you and we all will be learning an awful lot, is going to impact the rest of your careers as healthcare providers and as biomedical researchers and innovators. So it's also an unprecedented time of just enormous change. And for us to succeed in our work to advance health, it's imperative that we work together and that we do everything we can to really embody the cultural North Star, to do what's right, to make things better, and to be kind at every moment and at every opportunity. I want you to know that the leadership of the David Geffen School of Medicine is working closely with the UCLA health system, with UC Health, so the UC-wide health, with our sister UC medical schools, with all of our affiliates, Harbor, all of you, VA, Cedars-Sinai, and beyond, with the UCLA campus, and with national academic medical centers and schools across the nation, to really ensure that we're working together effectively to address this pandemic. As just one example, in a real first, in the last few days, I've had 2 calls with my fellow dean from USC, Laura Mosqueda, in which we've shared ideas and information about how we can join forces to really the pandemic. And I hope that these sorts of collective efforts are going to live beyond our current circumstances and will really define the future of medicine and biomedical research in our country. Today, the AAMC issued guidance on medical students' clinical participation, stating that, and this is verbatim, starting immediately, the AAMC strongly supports our member medical schools in placing at a minimum, a 2-week suspension on their medical students' participation in any activities that involve patient contact. This recommendation was issued jointly by the AAMC and by the LCME, the Licensing Committee on Medical Education. And the rationale and the goal for this temporary suspension are summarized as follows. First and foremost, this temporary suspension will allow medical schools a window of opportunity to develop and implement appropriate programs to fully educate all of their students for their return to clinical rotations with up-to-date information on COVID-19 and appropriate steps in place to ensure their own and their patients' safety. Second, this temporary suspension will contribute to the conservation of personal protective equipment across our institutions. And all those institutions are working together and with industry to ensure that we are able to obtain the necessary PPE going forward. But we're at a moment in time where we need to put those measures in place. So consistent with our plans at the AAMC, at the DGSOM, the AAMC plans to organize efforts across all of the member medical schools to develop alternative clinical learning approaches to identify critically important learner roles in our institutional responses to COVID-19 to support patient care, but that don't necessarily involve direct patient contact. And this is a national issue. And I also want you to note that the AAMC is working with the LCME to address all concerns about timely graduation, about requirements for education. We know that we're all in the same boat together. And I want to allay your individual concerns about what this means for your education at this moment in time. It's something that is nationally understood. So before handing it off to our Vice Dean for Education, Clarence Braddock, I want you to know that we're really truly dedicated to your safety and education, and that we consider you all to be critical members of our workforce as we address this COVID-19 pandemic. I've personally been uplifted by the messages from students who have reached out to say that they want to help in any way that they can. And this response and these messages really tell me that we're indeed training the most amazing, the most compassionate, the most caring and effective healthcare providers who will address the needs of our patients now and in the future. And that we're training amazing biomedical researchers who are going to develop the types of diagnostic tests, therapies, and cures that are going to really allow us to address not just this pandemic, but any healthcare challenge that we face in the future. And finally, really given the very rapid pace of change, and it is indeed, as you can imagine, sort of a dizzying pace of change, and one in which, again, I feel buoyed by our ability to communicate, even though we can't be in the same room. I want to urge you and thank you for working together as we address the next few weeks, the next few months in this challenge. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Clarence.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Greetings, everyone. I'm not sitting in the middle of LeConte Avenue. I put a back to the wall at my home. I'm actually at home. Many of you know I've been on a recent vacation and returned. I'm in a little bit of self-quarantine. I'm fine, but glad to be back and be able to work with all of you and our team here in addressing these issues. I'm going to make a few additional comments on top of what Dr. Martin said, then give a little bit of an overview of what we'll cover in the town hall, and then a little bit of housekeeping, which I'll do in a minute. I would start by saying that, just to emphasize that this town hall today is really the first in a series of steps and conversations we know we need to have with all of you. The goal of which is to make sure you're kept aware of and abreast of developments. As Dr. Martin said, things are developing very quickly and changing very quickly. But we also want to make sure we find, after today, continuing mechanisms to share that with you, but also to hear from you and respond to your concerns and questions. So really think of today as the start rather than the end or or the beginning of the process. The second thing to say, excuse me, is that really today's update is our best information we have at this time. As Dr. Martin says, there's been countless hours of conversation, both internally with our peers and contact with health professionals, et cetera. Today we have lots of answers, but we don't have all the answers, but we're actively working to continue to refine our plans for your experience as a student with the aim of your safety, but also continue your growth into future positions. A lot of that is basically driven by the epidemic itself and the combined public health and medical response. So answers that we don't have today, we will get. Answers that we have today may change, but that's the reason why we need to have really dynamic communication. All that said, our goal continues to be and always will be to assure that you have the best educational experience possible and continue our commitment to having you become outstanding physicians. So over the next few minutes, we're going to have a series of conversations from my colleagues in the Dean's office, giving you the latest, most concise updates on key changes to the program for each year. You'll hear a cogent summary from one of our colleagues, an expert in this area on COVID-19, and then we'll have time for your questions. There's a few housekeeping items. So we have this time scheduled till about 1:30. The session is being recorded and will be available to folks who didn't have a chance to join, or certainly if you want to go back and review things in more detail. We're going to ask that you save questions till the end. And I want to acknowledge Christos Havalos, who sent us a compilation of crowdsourced questions from the class that we'll be using to, looks like someone having trouble hearing me. Are you guys hearing me okay? Someone just popped up a question about that. I will try and speak slowly and more clearly. Anyway, there's a series of questions that were crowdsourced from the student body, many of which will be addressed in the comments that follows. But what I will be doing is checking those off as they come up. And when we get to the Q&A, we'll start by making sure we cover all the questions that Christos sent a couple of hours ago. In addition, I see that people are asking questions on the Q&A feature. I will be monitoring that and answering those to the best I can. If I can't answer them through that, I'll bring them into the discussion. The other sort of housekeeping thing is just to, while you're on the call, to please make sure you stay on mute, at least till we get to the Q&A. When we get to the Q&A, as I said, we'll start with the questions that have been sent, and I'll tee those up, read them aloud, and direct them to the appropriate person on the call. And then if time permitting, we'll do Q&A. When we get to that point, I'll give you further instructions about how to ask questions, but largely we'll be using the chat function in Zoom to tee up a queue of questions. I'm looking at my notes here. Okay, so those are the housekeeping points. So we're going to start next with a year-by-year review, but before doing that, I want to turn things over to my colleague, our Dean of Students, Dr. Lee Miller, who wants to make a few remarks, and then we'll transition into the year-by-year review. Dr. Miller.
Thanks so much, Dr. Braddock, and hi there, folks. I'm sitting in Dr. Martin's office with social distancing, and there's kind of a robot camera here with its head sort of turning, so it's a little bit surreal, and I can't see the screen, but I can hear everything. Anyway, I'm going to make my thank you. I'm going to make my comments really brief because I want to maximize the time that we have for the curricular deans to really walk through the logistics for each of the 4 years in the medical school program, and very importantly, as Dr. Braddock said, so we can try to get through as many questions as possible. But before passing the baton to the curricular folks, I do have just a few take-home points that I want to share with folks. And the first is really, in some ways, we've been hearing this over and over again, that it's such a fluid situation, and we're taking things one day at a time, and in some cases 1 hour at a time. And I just want to express my thank you for your patience as things change over the days ahead. I also want to extend my thanks to the leadership of each of the four classes, and Dr. Braddock mentioned that Christos has sent in questions, but we've been getting them from all 4 presidents, and I'm really grateful. And
Lee, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think the participants are having trouble hearing you. Do you think you could move closer to the mic?
Is this better? Hold on, we have some IT folks who are trying to help us.
How about this? Is this a little better? 1, 2, 3.
Hello?
They're muted.
They're muted. Someone,
yeah, so can you chat? Let us know.
Could one person send a, I can't see the messages either that are coming in, so if someone could just tell me if
it's much better. They're all saying yes.
Everyone's saying yep better. Everyone's saying yep better.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Right. Sorry about that.
Just stay close to the mic and you'll be fine, I think.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just repeat what I said very, very briefly. I really want to keep the comments my comments brief, because it's so important that the curricular deans can have the time to walk through the logistics for each of the 4 years in the program, and also very importantly that we can start addressing the many questions that you have. I highlighted that this is such a fluid situation, and we have to take things one day at a time, and in some cases 1 hour at a time. And I thank all of you for your patience as things change. And I also would like to thank the leadership of each of the 4 classes of the medical school. All 4 class presidents have been great representatives of their class and have sent in questions. Some of them have had an infectious disease focus that we have triaged to individuals with expertise. We've compiled an updated FAQ that will be going out soon that will have answers to many of those infectious disease questions, but we'll also have some expertise a little bit later in this Zoom call. I also just want to highlight that there's a huge team of folks that are looking out for you and your educational program. We're meeting very frequently throughout the day and the night. I just want you to know that there's a force so committed to your educational experiences, while at the same time doing everything that we can to keep you healthy, and also to explore different and creative ways in which you can contribute over the days ahead. Now, while before I pass the baton to other folks who are in curricular affairs, I just want to highlight the support resources that are available to everyone. And I'd like everyone to have a very low threshold for reaching out to the student affairs team, including Brandon and all of us on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Everyone is online working from home. Dr. Kalmus and I, of course, are here for you, but we also have 4 fantastic assistant deans of student affairs and other deans in the DIO office who want to stay closely connected with you. And in addition to Daphne, we have such great partners, and I hope that you'll please reach out to Deb, Jason, Holly, Ilgi, Valencia, and Kathy. Now, the uncertainty that we have is very stressful, and it's stressful for all of us. And to many of the questions that have been coming in, we've had to say we just don't know yet. And I know that this is stressful, and many of us also have tremendous anxiety about our elderly loved ones. And our colleagues in the Behavioral Wellness Center have made themselves available with extended hours. I'm very grateful for that. So
And teletherapy.
And I was just going to say remote. Dr. Martin said teletherapy. So please take advantage of this additional level of support with teletherapy and remote appointments. But they've expanded weekend hours, evening hours, and I'm very appreciative of everything that Dr. Miyota and her team has done. And finally, I just want to add in here how proud I am of you. And there has been an outpouring of messages from students in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year classes asking how you can help and how you can contribute during this public health crisis. And really your generosity and your selflessness that you've exhibited through these communications really make us so very proud. So please know that we're here from you. It's absolutely critical that we continue to communicate openly and work together as a team. We're all in this together, and we'll navigate this together. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton back to Dr. Braddock, who's in front of Geffen Hall.
Yes, thanks, Lee. While Dr. Miller was talking, I'm trying to get to most of the questions that are in the Q&A, and I'm writing down some notes, which we'll get to later. Now I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Zaldi Tan. Dr. Tan, as you know, is our Assistant Dean for the Pre-Clerkship Curriculum, and he's going to give a brief synopsis of current state of things for the MS1s and current state of things for MS2. Dr. Tan.
Thank you, Dr. Braddock, and greetings to our students, and I hope you're all staying healthy. I'm happy to provide you with a summary of really a lot of other meetings and hours and meetings that we have held with your faculty, with your block chairs and your thread chairs and the curricular affairs staff in order to make this transition from in-person to virtual learning or online learning as seamless as possible. So I appreciate your patience as I go through some of the changes during this transition. So I'm going to start with the MS1s for first-year students. As you know, our lectures have now transitioned into Zoom. We are working, the curricular staff are working to make sure that all the lecturers are able to access Zoom, deliver the content via Zoom. One of the advantages of Zoom is that you can raise your hand and have a chat session as we're having here. So we encourage all students to attend the lectures during the time that they're being held so that you can participate and we can ensure a lively virtual discussion of the content. We want to keep you as engaged as possible in the content and engage with the faculty as much as possible. And the way to do that is by doing things during attending the Zoom lectures. For those of you who can't attend the lectures when it's being held, this will also be recorded and be delivered via Panopto through Geffen. So you can also view the lectures at a later time if you wish. Regarding the anatomy lab, that's the other big change that just happened recently. You all got the message from Dr. Elena Stark, your anatomy thread chair, regarding the change. So effective immediately, the anatomy lab will be closed. And Dr. Stark has outlined in that email to you how the anatomy content will be delivered. She will send you an email on Friday regarding she'll send you instructions on how to learn the content. She'll also post the lectures and lab materials on Geffen as usual on Friday afternoon. And then she will also give you specific pointers on how to pick out the clinically relevant points and also give you additional resources such as cadaveric images that you can see in order to understand the materials as well as you can in the virtual environment. The examinations, instead of the anatomy practical exams, it will be based on the module that will be delivered over the 5 weeks of block 4. So if you can imagine, instead of pinning, the cadavers, what will happen is that she will put in arrows, for example, in the structures that she would like you to identify, and as well as secondary questions associated with that. So Dr. Stark will give you more detailed information regarding the content, the modules, and the exam during the next few weeks. And of course, I want to acknowledge that I know that many of you have expressed that you really want to be able to view to be able to experience the actual specimen. So she will make that possible by hosting an anatomy lab, an optional anatomy labs for those of you who are interested. So that will likely happen towards the end of the summer, likely after block 5, or in the beginning of the fall quarter, depending on how this pandemic plays out. But just know that there will be opportunities for those students who are interested in the cadaveric MSK anatomy to attend the lab at a later time when it's more feasible. Again, more details about anatomy lab will be shared to you by Dr. Stark. Moving on to the Block 4 clinical skills specialty session, as was previously communicated by Ashley Seymour through an email. This will all be transitioned virtually. These are typically hosted at the West Los Angeles VA. So instead of the students going to the West LA VA, the video showing the different maneuvers for the MSK exam will be delivered by video. And then we hope that you will have a chance to study them and practice on them. And then we will also be hosting an optional opportunity for students via Zoom again to get the real-time feedback on their MSK examinations from the tutors who are actually PM&R residents. So we will keep the 8 to 9 a.m. schedule available on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays for these virtual feedback sessions from the PM&R residents. You should have separate communication about the logistics of that from Hillary Koenig or Ashley Seymour, and we will set that up, and hopefully you can get some feedback on your examination skills via Zoom. Moving on to Doctoring 1, I corresponded with Dr. Nashine and Dr. Brooke. So the chaplain rounds and the remaining chaplain rounds and the Alcoholics Anonymous sessions have been postponed till a later time when it's more feasible to restart them. The next 2 sessions of the doctoring, if you look at your schedule, will be delivered via Zoom. So Dr. Nashine and Brooke are working on the logistics for that. The last 2 sessions for doctoring for this academic year are involve direct observation. So we are working with them to find a way to make that happen virtually, or if that is not possible, we will find a way to reschedule that at a later time to make sure that you do get the direct observation feedback from your tutors. So please stay tuned from Dr. Nashine Brooke or from Monica Fergoso, your thread coordinator for Doctoring 1. PBL have all been transitioned to Zoom format. The feedback that I've gotten from my curricular affairs staff is that it has worked very well, and that the small groups have been functioning very well, and the interactions have been pretty robust. So we plan to continue the PBL for the rest of block 4 in this manner. And again, for any feedback or any questions, please direct them to Mary Frances Williams, who's coordinating the virtual PBL. Preceptorship, we have corresponded with Dr. Oy, and we decided that all preceptorships will be postponed. We urge all students to upload all the sessions that you have attended, so that Dr. Oy and his team will have a better idea of how many preceptorship sessions you have completed. I know at least 4 have been scheduled, but I know that some of you may not have completed all 4, but it's important for Dr. Oy to know how many you have completed. And we've also asked the preceptors for the attendance cards to match it up with the number of sessions that you completed, and then we'll work together with Dr. Oy to decide on how to give you additional preceptorship sessions whenever deemed necessary. Shadowing, all forms of shadowing has been postponed, as you know. The teaching kitchen has been postponed, and all examinations, or we're working with the Educational Measurement Unit and the Educational Technology team to deliver that remotely by the Safe Exam browser, and additional details regarding the Block 4 midterms will be delivered to you when the time comes. So that is all I have to say for the first years. I'm sure there might be some additional questions that I'm happy to answer or direct to the appropriate person as necessary. Now, just very briefly on the second year, for the second year students, so congratulations on completing Block 9. So you are now in your dedicated study time, and we urge you to continue practicing social distancing during your study period, but to please continue your studies. All shadowing experiences for the MS2s have been postponed as well. And finally, for the US MLE Step 1 exam and testing sites, we are keeping our ear out for announcements from the Prometric centers regarding the impact of the epidemic on the exam scheduling. So we will please rest assured that we will forward and communicate with you any information we get regarding the testing from our national partners as soon as we get them. But that's all I have to say right now with the Prometric centers until more information is available. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say something about the MS1. So regarding Block 5, we've had recent communication. Dr. Braddock had a recent communication with your Block 5 chairs, Dr. Hauser and DeGiorgio. So Block 5 will now be delivered entirely virtually. So we're still working out some of the details regarding, the virtual dissection, et cetera. So that will be provided to you, but we are comfortable now saying that Block 5 will be delivered virtually as well. So back to Dr. Braddock.
Right. Thanks so much, Dr. Tan. Just a couple of, to reiterate some of the housekeeping things. So for folks who may have joined, we're going through now the concise review of the changes currently in place for the year. Thank you, Dr. Tan, for doing MS1 and MS2. And next we'll be doing Dr. Ha, but I do want to remind folks, if you're on, please go on and stay on mute if you can. We will be doing Q&A after Dr. Ha, and we'll also hear from Dr. Hoffman on COVID-19. Also, just remind folks that this is being recorded. So if you missed part of it or you can't stay for the whole thing, it is going to be recorded, and recording will be available to you and also to folks who maybe weren't able to join us. I have been monitoring the Q&A, so thank you for sending those in. It's actually quite helpful. I think I've answered 28. Looks like the queue is back up to 19, so I'll keep doing that. But next I want to introduce Dr. Ed Ha, who, as you know, is our Assistant Dean for Clerkship Education, and he's going to review MS3 and MS4 changes. Dr. Ha.
Thanks so much, Dr. Braddock. I really just want to start by echoing the sentiments raised by everyone on this call to thank you all for your flexibility. I know it's been a really just fluid time, and this is unprecedented for many of us. And so we thank you really for your flexibility, your commitment, your dedication, your desire to help each other and help the community as well. You know, of the classes, I think the third years are probably feeling the most dramatic change as of yesterday with our decision to pause the direct patient care components of the core clerkships for 3 weeks. You also heard earlier from Dean Martin, the AAMC statement that pertains to this. And, you know, we'll explain in a few minutes why we fell on 3 weeks as opposed to the recommended 2 weeks towards the end of the month. So we really hope that this 3-week period, while it won't be able to be completely replaced in terms of the direct patient care experiences, will be a time where 3 things are accomplished. The first is continuing development of core clinical skills and core knowledge. The second is providing training on COVID-19 and protecting oneself. And the third is to integrate you all into helping with the health system where there is need. And so our hope is really that we'll be able to integrate with, my apologies, I'm gonna have to pause for a second, my apologies.
The realities of telecommuting.
I know, it's great, it's great.
I just would, while Dr. Ha stepped away, I just wanted to, after Dr. Ha, we will hear from Dr. Risa Hoffman, infectious disease expert, director of our global health education program. And we'll be hearing from her concise update on COVID-19 and what we know. Back to Dr. Ha.
Yeah, my apologies for that, everybody. So yeah, so we definitely want to find ways in which our health system needs help and find ways to utilize your collective talent to do so and to serve the community. And so we'll be communicating with you all via the clerkship chairs and, you know, from the dean's office as well, the types of opportunities that we'll be thinking about working with you guys in serving the community. So, you know, there was a question I think that was sent by Christos that asked about whether these 3 weeks would need to be made up in the future. You know, for those that are on 4-week clerkships right now, the 3-week period would align with the next rotation switch. And our thinking right now is that these 3 weeks would serve as the remaining 3 weeks of your clerkships so that you would complete your clerkship at the end of these 3 weeks. This is obviously also a fluid situation. The clerkship chairs are actively working on creating curriculum that will help bolster the development of your clinical skills and also your knowledge in those core learning objectives for each of the clerkships. And so we will be engaging with them through this 3-week period to ensure that we are not falling short of fulfilling these learning objectives in some significant way. And then certainly if at the end of the 3-week period, the clinical environment is such where we still don't think it's feasible to integrate you guys back into the normal direct patient care activities, we'll have more discussions regarding that at that time. But at present, our goal is that this 3 weeks, while not exactly equivalent, will still allow you guys all to fulfill the learning objectives of the courses, and that there won't be any need for making up this time, all right? Just to go through each clerkship briefly, and who to look out for communications from. So for neurology, the clerkship chair is Dr. Yvette Bordelon. She will be conveying messaging to her coordinator about activities that will be held for all of you, potentially starting as early as today. For psychiatry, the clerkship chair is Dr. Brandon Ito, who will also be communicating with you all via his coordinator in a similar fashion. For family medicine, the clerkship chairs are Dr. Dan Vigil and Dr. Charlie Cardenas. So be expecting communications from them. I did get an email communication from a student asking, who's at a remote site for family medicine, asking if they could return back to campus, back to Los Angeles. The answer is yes. So for those of you joining that are still at remote sites, please do come back to campus. Almost virtually all of the activities will be remote still, but we do want you guys back near us in the event that we'll be sort of, again, engaging with health system activities to help the community, et cetera. Ambulatory medicine, so the clerkship chairs are Dr. Mark Munakata and Dr. Art Gomez, so be expecting communications from them. Inpatient medicine, the clerkship chair is Dr. Wendy Simon, so be expecting communications from her. For pediatrics, it's Dr. Deb Lehman, and for OBGYN, it's Dr. Lisa Nicholas. One comment for those of you that are currently on OBGYN and pediatrics, your MDME shelf exam is scheduled for this Friday. We are still working with our library resources to ensure that we have sufficient capacity to ensure also that there's enough distance between you all when taking the examination to abide by social distancing. We should have a more firm update in the next 24 hours. So be on the lookout for that with regards to how we're going to ensure that you all are able to take this examination on Friday as originally scheduled. Just some of the other coursework. So distance-based healthcare is finished, and longitudinal preceptorship, as you receive the communication from Dr. Talia Spector, has been suspended. And so, just be sure to complete your attendance cards for what you've been able to do to this date and turn those in to her. And then CPX. So the CPX OSCE examination is scheduled for next month. Again, this is a fluid situation. We will be reevaluating the situation as we get closer to the first date when that examination is scheduled to be administered. Additionally, the CPX directors, Dr. Danny Kahn and Dr. Esteves Hernandez, are engaging and collaborating with the California schools that do this same examination and discussing with them either alternate plans or adjustments or adaptations to the current plan as well. We are also closely communicating with our standardized patient program leadership just to ensure that we're doing the right thing, both for you all as students, but also for the standardized patient population as well. So be on the lookout for communications that are more definitive about the format of CPX and sort of what we're going to be doing with that this year. And then Foundation for Fourth Year, which is the first week of the fourth year. It's a 1 week, pretty intense hands-on skills-based session that's in the third week of May. This is a bit of a ways off, and so no definite communications about this as of yet. No decisions have been made. So, again, we'll reevaluate as we get closer to the course date and what is happening locally with COVID before we make a decision about that. Right. So, and the last thing I should say is a lot of our third year cohort are obviously planning on doing away rotations, et cetera. At present, there is an indefinite hold on being able to do away rotations. And I know that there are several questions about this in the general document that was sent by Christos. So we'll try and tackle those in the Q&A portion of this and have more conversations about that moving forward as well. For the fourth year class, so, you know, the vast majority of you are essentially done, and we are days away from finding out where you guys all will be going for residency training. I know that some of you have some remaining course requirements, and some of you actually have volunteered to potentially go on rotations to help, given the likelihood that our hospitals are going to be stretched very thin with regards to manpower to care for the patients. So there will be an email communication going out to the fourth year course elective chairs and the directors for fourth year medical student education as well. There have been some questions from both faculty and students as to whether the same conditions for the third years will be true for the fourth years. And right now, our perspective is no, that the conditions will be different, that you all are months away from being full-fledged MDs. You all are months away from taking care of patients and being able to write orders independently. So we do feel that you guys will be able to add significant contributions to the care of patients. The caveat will be because the local hospitals and the local services have some sort of specific processes that they're trying to work through and specific issues. The one thing we would ask all of you to do who are considering more direct patient care specific electives is to reach out to the course chairs to ask specifically what their perspective is about having a fourth year on, who obviously is very skilled, but just to ensure that things like PPE and patient load, et cetera, are appropriate for an experience like that. But we do encourage you all to explore that. And this is true for those that have still remaining course requirements or those that just want to volunteer your time as well. We ask that you would engage and speak with the course chairs to ask in advance to pursuing this. In the 200 level coursework, there are several options that, you know, for those of you that are concerned, or, you know, for those of you that have chronic illnesses or are immunocompromised or live with folks that are in that vulnerable population, we have about 4 or 5 radiology electives and pathology electives as well, 4 or 5 pathology electives. That would be good options as well to fulfill your 200 level clinical requirements also. So those hopefully will be sufficient to allow you guys to, you know, finish your course requirements, your elective requirements in order to fulfill graduation requirements as well. If any of you guys have questions about that, individual questions, feel free to reach out to me because we can field those on a case-by-case basis. Last statement I'll make is, you know, the college seminar requirement. So as you all recall that you have to fulfill 6 college seminars in order to graduate. We no longer have any college seminar offerings, and the one final one that was going to be offered through the College of Drew University or the Charles Drew University has been canceled because of the local situation. So if any of you have not been able to complete your 6 evening seminars, please do reach out to your college chairs. They will help you sort of find a alternate activity that will fulfill that requirement as well. But, you know, I know that this is a really unprecedented time. And, you know, just as I started my comments with, I just want to thank you all for your commitment, your dedication, and your desire to do what's right for all of you and for the patients that, you know, we sort of signed up to take care of. So with that, I'll send it back to Dr. Braddock.
Thanks, Dr. Ha, very much for that thorough review. I'm still answering questions. Again, just to remind folks, this is being recorded. We'll next hear from Dr. Risa Hoffman. Dr. Hoffman is a faculty leader in infectious disease, also director of our global health education program, and she's going to give us some guidance and thoughts on the COVID-19 situation. Dr. Hoffman.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. We were having some technical challenges. Okay, great. So I'm going to focus on a few areas that I think are causing a lot of anxiety, and then can definitely take questions at the end. So I think the first biggest issue has been the concern about lack of testing for COVID. And I think the good news is we're making incredible progress with our access to testing. Every day it's getting a little bit better. So currently, people can be tested in three different, UCLA patients could potentially be tested, or healthcare workers or medical students in multiple different ways. But we have our own in-house COVID test that we're running in the UCLA micro lab, which is located in Brentwood. We're running currently 60 tests per day, and hoping that by the end of the week and into next week, we're up to 120 tests per day, and looking at a more efficient platform, potentially early April, first week in April, able to run up to 400 to 500 tests per day. For those people who need testing, we're reserving our in-house tests for people that are the sickest or need an answer the quickest, which includes healthcare workers. For others, Quest Labs has a test, and we're able to send out to Quest Labs. And there's still testing going on through LA County that does account for the minority. So I think in terms of the anxiety about it's impossible to get a test, that is quickly alleviating. We are testing a lot of people now, and I think you're seeing the results of that testing initiative as you watch the numbers tick up, increased cases in LA County, increased cases in California, and increased cases across the US are in large part due to the fact that we finally are testing both in the community and in our health systems. For students in particular, we're working with the ASH Center so that you would be able to be tested through the ASH Center. And we can use both the resources of ASH as well as the resources of our own micro lab for any testing that would need to be done. So I think the take-home message for testing is we have it, we're ramping it up quickly, and it will get better and better with time. The second sort of main, I think, area where I'm hearing a lot of anxiety and questions is this concern about asymptomatic transmission. So can I bring this home to my parents? Can I spread this around while I feel well? And it's hard. The data is changing. We're learning more all the time. Currently, it's felt that the vast majority of transmission is coming from people with symptoms. And so the messaging about stay home if you're sick is the best messaging that we can use. It is possible that some of the transmission, and it's again the minority, can come from people in the 1 to 2 days before they develop symptoms. It is transmission by droplet, which means that you really have to be in very close contact with somebody in that asymptomatic phase to be at risk of getting infected by them. So, droplets are, when you speak and you have, oral secretions, or rubbing your nose and touching someone else, or, those sorts of close physical contact with things that could contain droplets and virus. So, and again, that really probably accounts for the minority. And we don't know the extent to which completely asymptomatic people transmit. We think it's very, very small, and that this is most relevant for people who are actually getting sick in those couple days before they develop symptoms. So again, I think there's lots of questions around, what if I had an exposure or possible exposure? I would live with people who are immunocompromised. And I think, we just have to really take those questions on a case-by-case basis. And I'm happy to help with questions that people have offline on that. I think the third big area, I think people are all very anxious because we do see different reports of how of the case fatality rate for this virus. And I think that it's evolving, and because testing has been quite limited, and we have largely been testing the sickest patients in many places in the world, the case fatality rates look higher than they probably are. That it is still very true that this is the higher case fatality rates are in older people. Although, this can have serious health consequences for younger people, and that's why we're being so careful with everybody. And the other thing that's important is, I think, reports from places like Italy, which are, causing a lot of anxiety, and every population is different. So that what the population looks like will contribute a lot to what the virus does to that population. And so populations that have many older people, many smokers, may have higher case fatality rates. So I think that the important take-home points are, I think the case fatality rate is much lower than that is being reported. That there's a large role that we can play in helping to protect our vulnerable population, and that is what we're all doing here, which is social distancing and converting education to online, and supporting what we can from afar. And I think that you guys have so much to offer. I don't know if anybody heard Debbie Burks in the press conference yesterday, but your generation is actually so good at being in touch and providing support through social media. And I think we all have a lot to learn from using social media, using online resources to be in touch and support each other and learn and grow at a time where we can't do it, all together in the spaces that we would normally be in. So, and the Division of Infectious Diseases is thinking hard about how we can engage medical students of all levels in helping us with our efforts. And so we're trying to think about that, and we'll get any information out through the medical school if we can take any volunteers to help in any way that doesn't involve direct patient care. So stay tuned for more information on that. I'll end there.
Great, thank you so much. That was very, very helpful. We're now at the part of our town hall for the question and answer. And as promised, I've been trying to kind of keep track of the things already addressed from the questions that were submitted earlier. I've also been tracking as best as I can the Q&A you've been submitting. It's actually quite helpful. There's about 50 or so that I've answered. There's a bunch I haven't, but I just spent the last few minutes skimming them, and I'm going to start with a couple of comments on some common themes that I'll either answer or I'll ask my colleagues to answer. One had to do with financial aid, various versions of what will happen to financial aid. Because you're still enrolled, financial aid will not change. That's sort of the bottom line. This has come up with regard to MSTP and other forms of financial aid. So hopefully that is clear. The main thing to know is that even though we're moving to a virtual experience, the educational experience is still happening. And as such, you're still enrolled, you're still going to be getting credit. Another version of that was concern for students on the clerkships currently during this 3-week hiatus where you'll have no clinical activity. The question about whether you'll have to repeat or whether you get credit. You will get full credit for those 3 weeks. We don't know what will happen longer term, but as of now, no one will need to make up any of that 3-week period. There may be more questions on the clerkships, but I'm just going to touch on some of these other issues. A lot of questions about the OSCE for Block 4, our standardized patient program, in consultation with the rest of the standardized patient programs through the state, has gone on a sort of a temporary hiatus, a pause in all standardized patient activities. As such, there's not planned an OSCE for any foreseeable future. A lot of questions about the breaking news about the Prometric centers. I didn't go into that online, but just will make a couple of comments, and Dr. Miller or Dr. Tan may want to add to this, that certainly we're, like all of you and like all medical students in medical schools around the country, are a little bit at the mercy of the Prometric centers in terms of their own efforts to try to respond responsibly to what's happening. The fact that they're now have announced that they're closed through April 16th certainly means there will be no step 1 exams through that period of time. Uncertain what happens with that, and we will be discussing that in terms of what adjustments to deadlines that may be important to that. But Dr. Miller or Dr. Tan, do you want to comment further on that?
Yeah, I think it's just so hot off the press that we need to see what the Prometric and NBME folks are sharing with us, and we'll obviously have to make adjustments in policy to respond to it. So just sit tight, and I promise that we'll get back to you when we have some more information.
And regarding the impact on clinical foundations, I saw that as one of the questions. So we'll have to coordinate with Dr. Toulouse and Pizzigaro regarding what possible adjustments that we need to make for clinical foundations if delayed further. But so please stay tuned.
So yeah, and I think the general thing to remember, and Dean Martin said this at the top, that we're largely guided by our desire to respond responsibly to the public health dimension of the epidemic, to assure social distancing, so that activities that we can do virtually or that we can do in ways that preserve the principle of social distancing, we're trying to find more and more creative ways to do that. Another cross-cutting question had to do with MS4s or people looking towards the MS4 year in terms of electives and elective options. For those graduating this year, we have every intention to make sure that every student has some experience to complete required curricular requirements and to graduate on time. Dr. Ha and I are working actively with the elective community. We roughly see electives falling into 3 categories. There are some categories of electives that do not have any direct patient care, patient contact, and that could be conducted with social distancing preserved. So those are certainly ones we're actively pursuing. There are some in which, as he said, the MS4 at this point of the year, who possesses a full year and a half of clinical experience, who is very close to being an MD, we will be working with each of those individual sub-I or type of rotations to ask the question of whether the MS4 can work in that environment and add value in terms of adding to the patient care workforce, assuring that they will be afforded adequate personal protective equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So that's evolving. That's why we don't have a very specific answer right now, but we literally within the next day or two we'll have very specific advice on the MS4. The third category of MS4 rotations would be, there are some clinical rotations where the calculus might fall the other way, but we're also, someone asked this question, we're also actively looking at potentially creating an elective that would allow some deeper study of the COVID-19 epidemic itself, training on PPE, training on public health dimensions of an epidemic. So we think that's something we can create. It's not done yet, but that's something we're hoping to be able to offer. But I would just reiterate that any MS4, it's our commitment to make sure that we create some way for you to meet the graduation requirements and graduate on time this year. So those are the kind of cross-cutting things. I know I haven't touched on anything. I'm going to start going down the list, and I'll ask my colleagues to comment. Maybe I'll start with Dr. Ha. Maybe I'll add to this, Ha, Tan, and then I'll add. A lot of questions about ways, two forms of ways in which students who are eager to contribute in some positive way to the overall UCLA health response. And we have a lot of activity there in terms of planning. And similarly, that has implications for the kinds of things that students on clinical rotations will be doing. But maybe, Dr. Ha, maybe you can embellish a little bit on that. I think you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Folks are probably aware that each of the hospitals in our health systems is being stretched and coming up with protocols and processes to both deal with the patient care of COVID or suspected COVID patients in the hospitals and in the clinics. But certainly the community at large is obviously very alarmed, as you probably noticed with the grocery store lines at opening, et cetera. So there are a lot of opportunities to engage. Several are, things like being a community call responder. So those that are in the community that are calling with concerns or, with concerns about their own health and responding and being a part of that response team. Other things would be participating in telemedicine, and we've actively had conversations with some of our clerkship chairs about integrating you all into that system as well. I will be meeting with the sort of point person for the deployment opportunities later this afternoon, and so I will have a full menu of opportunities to share with both the Dean's Office and you all also, and the clerkship chairs as we plan on how best to allow you all to contribute to the ongoing situation. So stay tuned from that standpoint.
Thanks. Dr. Tan, anything to add?
No, I think Dr. Ha has summarized what we know so far, but I just want to emphasize that we recognize that our medical students are a valuable part of our workforce, so we will find every way to access your time and your talents to contribute in some way to this crisis that we're currently experiencing. So please stay tuned.
Yeah, great, thank you. And just to reiterate what they both said, with a specific example, in a variety of environments, in pediatric outpatient and adult outpatient, there are just a huge flood of phone calls with people with questions, seeking health advice. And with social distancing, the advice from public health officials has been for people who are mildly ill or mildly concerned to not come to the doctor's office. And so one specific idea is, can all of you help by being knowledgeable people on the other end of those phone calls with patients to help manage the volume of that work? As Dr. Miller said, we are all in this together, and we've been working closely with UCLA Health as a broad health system to try to think through what are the best ways that we can collectively work together to support the massive volume of work. I'll give you another example outside of medical school. So in the residency realm, residency programs are beginning to have those residents who are on elective rotations called back from elective rotations to backfill and be available as a resource to their colleagues. Many residents are stretched because of the volume of patients. There are residents, not many, but a few who have other things, including perhaps being on self-quarantine. So that's an example of how we're all sort of really thinking outside the box, and we believe that all of you can be great contributors to that. So that's all not nailed down specifically, but we'll have a meeting with all the clerkship chairs on Thursday, and by then, I think each clerkship will have a plan that will for the third-year clerkships of how you will be actively engaged in patient care, albeit in different ways. So probably the main message for the MS3s is that from our standpoint, you're actively engaged in the clerkship. The clinical component that we've temporarily paused is going to be migrate into some other way, which we believe will be both valuable for patients and also will be a tremendous educational value for you. It's also a good segue to another common question across the Q&A. And again, I'm sorry I've only answered about 40% of them. I will continue to go through them, but it has to do with MS1s who are asking whether they should cancel their housing contract and go home. And I want to address that. I start with the caveat that, of course, we respect what decisions individuals make, but it's our strong recommendation that you not do that for the following reasons. First of all, you are going to be actively engaged in education, and albeit certainly true that education can happen, virtual education can happen from everywhere or from anywhere, we really want to encourage people to stay within the region to be able to be as actively engaged, particularly if in a few weeks we are able to resume to some normalcy. The second is just a general public health recommendation to avoid travel. Travel that potentially puts you at risk, and then during that travel and transit potentially puts you at risk of exposure that you could carry with you to your destination. So that's part of it. And the third, and this is really important, is that we may need you. The magnitude of work that's needed by all of us collectively to manage our patients in our communities is substantial and growing, and we may need you. We may need you to man phones. We may need you to help in other ways. We've been grateful for all the ideas that many of you had about ways that you can help. You might think, well, I'm just an MS1, but you have deep knowledge. We will have a substantial body of skills already at this point in your training, and we may need you. So it would be our strong recommendation that you not cancel your housing contract, that you not return home, that you stay in the area and stay engaged for educational reasons, and also to help us be part of this effort. The next question I was going to move to, again, just I know Dr. Ha emphasized this and went through this, but just to say a word or two about reiterating about the shelf exam this week and ongoing, and the CPX. Maybe you could comment on those two things.
Sorry, did you want me to say more than what I...
just to restate what you said about shelf exam coming up, and,
okay.
and then comment about what we're current thinking is about CPX.
So as I mentioned, the OBGYN and pediatric clerkships, I know the exams are scheduled for this Friday. We are still engaging with the library to see if there's going to be sufficient space to accommodate the students that have to take those exams, but also allow social distancing as well. So just, stay tuned from that standpoint. We don't have a definitive response at this moment, but we should have one in the next 24 hours about that examination and where it will take place, and how you guys will be, sort of grouped together for that purpose. For the CPX, so the first date is coming up in early April. So each of you ordinarily would be scheduled to take the examination for a full day and be excused from clerkship activities. But because of concerns both for your safety and for the health of the standardized patients as well who volunteer their time, right now we're in a holding pattern. The first test date is coming up pretty soon, and so we'll have to make a decision at some point about whether to delay it or whether to do some sort of alternate activity. And then what I mentioned also was that our CPX directors here and the CPX operations manager, Ken Lay, have been meeting with the other California schools that hold the same examination to discuss, again, the current situation in California and how it's affecting the other schools and what those schools are considering as well. And the hope is that, as a collective group from the UC, we'll come up with some sort of solution that is a unified plan, but more to come as we get closer to that date, and we have the ability to see how things will evolve with COVID as it relates to standardized patient activities.
Thank you. The next item I'm going to come to is actually from the Q&A here, and I'm going to ask Dr. Miller to comment on this. A question about childcare, and I know it's been a big issue with our house staff and for many of our medical students, so maybe you might comment on what we're doing in that area.
Yeah, I think that would like to speak with folks on an individual basis. We might be have some resources to help with the Physicians Aid Association, and I know that Dr. Martin is looking into what resources might be available for both undergraduate and graduate medical education. And Kelsey, did you want to mention that?
So there's an active conversation on the campus now about resources that can be used for anyone in the healthcare system, UME, GME, in terms of helping to provide support for childcare. And that's an ongoing conversation. It's actually up at the level of University of California Office of the President to try to deal with some of the issues that are associated. So please stay tuned. It's top of mind for us. And then, an associated question that is that many other students have come up with requests to try to organize themselves to provide childcare for our frontline staff, and we're also working on whether and how that can be organized. So both sides.
Yeah, but while the wheels are turning up at Oakland at the UC Office of the President, I think what I'd like to do is just set up a Skype meeting, not a Skype meeting, a Zoom meeting with folks who are individually impacted. So just send a message to Roberta, Ray, and to me, and we'll make that happen.
Good, great.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to acknowledge that in the, oh, sure, go ahead.
While I have the Mike, I just want to highlight one thing that I neglected to say, and that is that that the academic support team is available throughout this time period. So you folks the students should have a low threshold for emailing individuals on that team to set up appointments. There'll be virtual appointments, but I know that folks would be very happy to be able to continue working on an individual basis. Okay.
That's important.
Great, thank you. We're just going to make a comment and I'll jump back into questions, but I just want to acknowledge that many of the comments in both the chat and the Q&A are really just wonderful ideas. I just want to acknowledge them. I can't acknowledge them all, but things ranging from folks who are eager to help do telephone health to suggestions about leveraging languages that you may be a native speaker in. It's a great idea. Leveraging CDC modules for a credit offered course for MS4s. These are great ideas that I've been thinking about and will fold into our thinking. Probably the next thing I'd address is a number of questions about both the MS3 and the MS1. So I just want to be really, it's really important for the MS3s to hear that we're not pausing your clerkship. The clerkship is actively ongoing. What we're pausing is the current clinical contact part of your clerkship. And I'm going to come back to the rationale for that. But I say it that way because we're working today with clerkship chairs and staff and faculty to create daily interactive activities online to assure you have the opportunity to continue to learn clinical medicine through didactics, through case conferences. We're expanding our use of online case simulations, all of which will happen on a daily basis in your clerkship to try to advance your learning, and will be done interactive with a faculty member in a Zoom. Well, it won't be this big. It won't be 507 participants, but it'll be all of you participating in a very dynamic way. The rationale for the pause is it's really important. We recognize and have always believed and still believe that you are, as MS3s, vital members of the healthcare team. What we had to look at in the totality of how we think about the healthcare workforce was, first of all, the question of whether each of our health systems had adequate PPE to provide to everyone in the healthcare team to be able to safely provide care to patients. That was a factor. We also thought about again, on a continuum of ways in which individuals contribute directly to patient care. We recognize that there are many, many ways, and we wanted to give ourselves time to think about creatively ways in which you as MS3s can still be learning clinical medicine and still be contributing to patient care, albeit in ways that didn't put you in the situation of contact with potentially infected patients. We realized that the early step, which was a very important step of stating that students shouldn't care for patients who were diagnosed with or under investigation for COVID-19, the students should be excluded of that, was a good idea. But we heard from many of you about very ambiguous situations of being sent to evaluate a patient in the ED with a cough or with some vague symptoms and worry about that exposure. And we know now that things have progressed to stance where, for example, at UCLA Health System, they have a rapid diagnostic drive-up service where people can drive up to have a brief intake. I may be getting this wrong, Dr. Hoffman, so I apologize. But my understanding is that every individual staffing that is in full PPE. So those are the reasons you're vital members of the team. All of us conferred about this over the weekend, and even in advance of hearing from the AAMC, we made the decision that this was the best course to give us time to think carefully and creatively about ways that you could contribute to the program. With regard to MS1, similarly, I just would reemphasize that yes, things are happening remotely, but you are still fully enrolled in the full program. We've made every effort to have every part of our pre-clerkship curriculum continue to the greatest extent possible, including both small group, large group, assessments to the greatest extent possible, and that remains our commitment. Okay, I'm looking at my list. Oh, one other thing, a few folks asked if they have already traveled out of the area. What I would say is please be in contact with us so we know where you are. I think we'll talk with you on a case-by-case basis. The same comment I made about travel would be true coming back. We'd like for you to come back, but we'd like to partner with you to make a good informed choice about travel decisions. Okay. Let's see here. We've covered most things. What I'm going to ask is that we have about a few minutes. I'm going to focus my attention at the bottom of the chat list. So if people have in the next few minutes questions that you haven't heard addressed, and the remaining, maybe 6 to 8 minutes, put them in the chat and put them. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, hypothetically need to take pathology, radiology. Okay, question about fourth year rotations. And just to reiterate what we said a little bit earlier and what Dr. Ha was reviewing, our current thinking is that we believe there are current fourth year rotations that do not involve direct patient contact, such as pathology or radiology, that could be conducted with appropriate social distancing. And we believe there are some rotations that do involve patient contact where the student can be a vital added complement to the workforce and can be assured adequate PPE. So those are what we're looking at, in addition to creating some other activities like a public health sort of thing. Well, you guys really took me seriously. A lot of things here. Okay, rotations away. A number of questions about leave of absence students. I apologize for not saying that again. Appreciate all the suggestions about ways that you can be engaged, and we will redouble our efforts to communicate to you. I think a lot of the questions had to do about the re-entry after a leave of absence. Given that where we are right now with a sort of focusing really on the next several weeks, we don't have specific answers, but we are looking at the foundations, the other activities that would be on the horizon. So please bear with us. We're actively thinking that through. Shelf exams. I'll ask Dr. Ha to correct me if I have this wrong, but we are working and still plan to have the shelf exams held in the TLC in the library. There's a little bit of background work going on there, but we do not plan to have the shelf exams administered remotely. But do you want to comment on that anymore, Dr. Ha?
No, not beyond the fact that there's some specific requirements to be able to take the MBME. So remotely taking the MBME is not an option, unfortunately. But again, we're exploring, as Dr. Braddock said, with library and with our educational technology services to see what other alternatives there might be, but would still require physically that you guys to come in and take the examination. Obviously, with the idea that we would group you guys such that you're able to take, you're able to practice social distancing, etc.
Thank you. There are a number of questions about, and I might ask, well, I'll come back to this one, but let's see. Oh, a number of questions about testing. And again, Dr. Hoffman, if you're still there, just I think the reiteration about, obviously the landscape of testing is evolving rapidly as other vendors are now being allowed to come forth with other products for testing. But there are a lot of questions about if they about what will be the availability of testing for individuals who need it. But maybe you could just reiterate that briefly.
Yeah, I mean, I think for you guys specifically, we would go through ASH, and you would connect to ASH, and they would either test you directly or refer you to us to get you tested. So I think, you know, ASH is prioritizing medical students who need to be tested. If it's family members or friends, it's best to work through a primary care provider, because every every region, every hospital is going to have a different system. But I do think that the testing availability will continue to improve on a daily, basis, and so hopefully that will help alleviate a lot of anxiety that comes from, I'm sick and I can't even find out if I have this virus. So I would say, if it's about you as a medical student, to work with the ASH Health Center, and they'll work with us. And if it's about a family member, that working through primary care providers, because systems are going to vary based on the location.
Thank you. I also see a number of questions now popping up about grading on the clinical clerkships. The clerkships that are having a shelf exam this week will have obviously been on that clerkship for some period of time. Students on surgery, of course, have just started. There are some clerkships where folks are just a week in. I would say, and again, I'll ask Dr. Haw to add to this, but we are actively talking about that. The obvious point that you're all making is, because the the grade is determined a large portion of that by the clinical grade. So we don't have an answer right now. Honestly, as I said at the top of my remarks, we have lots of answers to lots of questions, but not all the questions. It's a very, very important one. We seek to resolve this within the next several days. But do you want to comment more on that, Dr. Haw?
Yeah, so the clerkship chairs are really busy right now, trying to make sure that there are activities that are value added for your continued development of clinical skills and knowledge in those specialties. We have our regularly scheduled clerkship chairs committee meeting this Thursday, and one of the major agenda items revolves around grading and how that's going to look, especially for those of you that are currently on 4-week clerkships. If things pan out the way we're hoping, and folks are able to return, you all are able to return to clinical patient activities in 3 weeks, obviously that's going to impact you all the most. And so this is one of our major agenda items for this Thursday. And obviously we'll have more conversations, not just, I don't think we'll come to a final decision on Thursday, but it will be a start to getting some consensus on what should be done in that situation.
Thank you. And I know we're running out of time. And again, we've tried to address, there's a lot of great questions. There's two.
Clarence,
are you off mute?
Clarence, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just jumped in there. I saw a bunch of messages from third-year students related to away rotations through VSAS. And a couple of things about that. The AAMC has asked each medical school to put a hold on accepting visiting medical students. So we're not processing applications for non-UCLA medical students to come here through June. Each medical school will in turn have their own policy and what their time window will be that they're keeping that door shut. But they have asked every medical school to put a pause on that. There are a fair number of questions about refunds, and we're going to have our team liaise with the VSAS folks and the AAMC, and I'll try to get an answer to send out to the class about that.
Thank you. I'm going to throw in a couple of the brief things, and I'm going to end by asking Dr. Martin to make any closing remarks that she might like to make. There's a question about California residency. Please consult with our financial aid office if you are seeking California residency. If you have already left the state, I won't try to answer that, but that would be what you should do. And then I think maybe we'll. I think most of the things we've addressed, I would say we will be back to you with methods to continue to solicit your questions and get you answers. Thank you for all the participation. I'm going to turn things over to Dean Martin for some closing comments.
All right, well, I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to thank all my colleagues for their guidance here. And the final comments I want to make just have to do with the importance of communication. And I want everybody to do their very best to make sure that they read the emails that come from the dean's office. We are working hard to make sure that only essential emails will come through. But we recognize that we need to keep everybody up to date and informed. There is, if you go to the DGSOM website, you'll see on the banner that there's a link to a COVID-19 DGSOM specific website that we're updating on a daily basis with new information. There's also a really informative COVID-19 UCLA health website that I want you to make yourselves familiar with. And then, so that communication is important. And then finally, I just want to say a word about, we're all having to practice social distancing, but social distancing is really physical distancing. And we're all in a period of, lots of anxiety and how critical it is that you take care of yourselves. And so taking care of yourselves means that you need to get enough sleep, you need to eat well, you need to get outside. It's okay to go outside, take walks, and you need to stay in touch with one another and support one another. And you need to do the things that give meaning to you. For some people, it's reading. For other people, it's painting. For other people, it's dancing. For other people, it's into music. Make sure that you have that in your lives. And again, as Dr. Miller pointed out, there are, our people are so passionately available for you if you have issues that are concerned, whether it's BWC, if there are food security issues. We are here to try to address all of those issues for you. So please make sure that you reach out for anything that you need help with. And there's lots of efforts every day. I want you to know that every day there are about 25, 30 people who are on an hour-and-a-half call every evening trying to deal with all the changes that are happening. And that's just one in the education arena. And that's really just one of many such calls that are going on. So again, make sure that you take care of yourselves. We need you. All the patients and all the people in Los Angeles need you. And I want to thank all my colleagues and all of you for being on this call for this past hour and a half. So thank you.
Stay healthy.
And stay healthy. Right. Stay healthy.